Hey there, Darren Garman, and welcome to this episode of the Heartland Multifamily Show. The place for all things multifamily. And I'm excited to talk about this episode because we're going to be talking about being a person of influence. How do you become a person of influence? And if you are a person of influence, how can you have even more influence? So stay tuned. We're going to talk about how to be that person of influence here in just a moment. Welcome to the Heartland Multifamily Show, the shorter, more profitable path to multifamily ownership and investing. All right, here we go, being a person of influence. Now, this not only has to do with multifamily, this has to do with almost everything because it applies to everything. And I think you're going to get a lot of value out of this episode. But before we get into this episode, a couple of quick things. Number one, if what I talk about on this episode resonates with you, good or bad, I'd love to hear from you. So leave your comments below and would love to have some dialogue with you about this episode. Second, this is the place for all things multifamily. So if you like what you are watching and what you're listening to on this episode, make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss out on not only past episodes, but any future episodes here on the Heartland Multifamily Show. So, how do you become a person of influence? More than likely, you know you can and even should have more influence on others, right? And even if you're a person of influence now, how do you become a person of more influence? Because if you think about how you can influence people, you can influence, heck, even movements that you feel strongly about. Think about the kind of impact you can have not only on just maybe the people around you and close to you, but on many others. So being a person of influence is a big deal. And many people want to be a person of influence, okay? And even if they are a person of influence in some way, being a person of influence in even a bigger way, having a bigger impact is of importance and of interest to a lot of people. So let's talk about that. But before we do that, let me tell you that I'm coming to you from a position of, at some point in time, I was a person of no influence, okay? Absolutely none. So I went from a guy that was a prison guard, of all things, a prison guard, and someone with very little influence, if really any at all, to someone now that has, thousands of people, in some cases tens of thousands of people that listen to me, that contact me either with my podcasts or YouTube channel, emails, texting, and that doesn't count the hundreds of people that I've been able to impact as one of my investment partners in our apartment communities here in the Heartland. Okay, so how in the world, how does somebody go from prison guard guy, to a person of influence? And by the way, I'm just getting started here. I got a long way to go. All right, I'm not putting the brakes on anything here yet. But what has happened in my life? What have I done? What have I learned to go from prison guard guy, Mr. Prison Guard, to the person of influence that I am today? And again, I'm just getting started. I got a long way to go. Well, let me give you two key strategies that I've learned over decades, I could tell you, that have been a big game changer for me to be that person of influence, not only out there in life, but in the world of multifamily, of course. Number one is what I call simple but not easy. Simple but not easy. So what number one is, it's not anything that's going to be a huge discovery for you, okay? It's not going to be a huge, I didn't know that, Darren. That's new news to me. So I'm going to disappoint you in that regard. But well, here it is, and it's simply this: giving yourself permission to be that man or that woman of influence. You got to start by giving yourself permission to do that. Now, even though that sounds probably oversimplistic at first, I mean, the first time you hear that, probably, well, that's a little obvious, Darren. What the hell do you mean? Here's what I mean. Many, many people, and you may be one of them, you don't give yourself that permission to be a person of influence. You don't think you can do it. You don't think you have the ability. You don't think you've got the personality, the skill set. You don't think you can really do it. You don't feel confident in doing it. Matter of fact, maybe it scares you a little bit, right? Maybe you're a little scared by it. So what do? You don't do anything. You don't give yourself that permission to be that person of influence. And I'm going to tell you, and this is based on conversations I've had with thousands of people over the years, okay, doing what I do. And I can tell you that this is the biggest roadblock getting in the way of 99% of the people that want to be or could be just a fantastic influencer. And I'm not talking like YouTube influencer or Instagram. I mean, all that's good. I'm talking about having an impact on people's lives, a positive impact on those close to them and those maybe not. And the main reason is they don't give themselves permission to do it because they don't think they will be able to do it. Yeah, sure, sometimes people will try. Maybe they'll put their toe in the water, maybe try to do some things to be that person of influence. Maybe they will, but they find out that maybe it's a little harder than they thought. Maybe it's going to take a little bit more time than they thought. Maybe they're going to run up against some obstacles or some roadblocks more often than they thought. Then what do? Let's just kind of retreat back into our comfort zone, our comfort level where we're not going to be that person of influence. And it's sad. Now, by the way, I'm not saying everybody needs to be a person of influence. I'm not saying that your worth in this world is judged by how influential you are. That's not the case at all. Not the case at all. As a matter of fact, if you're happy with not being a person of influence, and that's kind of, hey, Darren, that's where I want to be, man. That's where I want to be. Perfect. Good for you. I got no problems with that. None. But, and you know what I'm going to say, if you are in that category of someone that can be just a fantastic influence, if you gave yourself permission, should be that person of influence, if you give yourself that permission. Man, just think what you could do. Just think what you could do. So how do you go through that process? Let's say, Darren, I want to, number one, I give myself permission. What's one of the first things I need to give myself permission to do? You say permission. All right, I'm ready to give myself that permission. What's the first thing I need to do? The first thing you need to do is start being uncomfortable. Okay, start being uncomfortable. How do you do that? You start reading books that you're not quite familiar with. Okay, you start reading books on other people that have achieved influence, that have achieved success, that have gone down that road that you want to go down. You start reading those books. Now, do you think it's going to be comfortable for you to read those books? Maybe watch those videos, maybe listen to those podcasts of those people that have accomplished and done things in terms of being someone of influence that you want to do. You think that's a comfortable thing to do? No. You're going to be reading about stuff that would probably be a little bit boring. You're going to be reading about stuff that maybe you're not going to quite understand at first. Maybe they're going to use like technical jargon and terms that you're just not quite familiar with yet. That's the way it goes. Okay, you've got to be able to now dive into the subject matter that you're not used to, maybe you don't understand and you're not comfortable with. That's where you start in terms of giving yourself permission. That's part A. Part B, in terms of giving yourself permission, is simply this. You got to start hanging around people better than you. And I've talked about this in other episodes, in some of my podcasts, and in other places. You got to start listening to, watching, and reading about people that are better than you. Better in terms of being a better influencer. Better at influencing people with maybe what they do as someone that, I don't know, maybe runs their own business, maybe runs their own company, maybe somebody that is doing things and accomplishing things at a level higher than where you are, where your understanding is, and where you currently are sitting. All right, we're going to take a quick break. I hope you're enjoying this episode. I'm going to be having a free webinar coming up, the link's below, on how to correctly and with low risk invest your IRA or 401k in really good multifamily properties. A majority of our investors do this. I do this personally. It's not illegal. Make sure you click the link below. We'd love to have you. Is that comfortable to do that? No. Is it comfortable being in a room of people that are, let's say, maybe more financially successful than you are at that time? Maybe not. Maybe is it comfortable for you to be sitting at the same table, close with people that are known influencers? Maybe not only maybe in your community, but maybe regionally or heck, even nationally. Is it comfortable for you to be sitting there having conversations? Probably not the most comfortable thing to do, is it? Right? But by giving yourself that permission to be uncomfortable with taking action in areas that you're not comfortable in or with, in other words, reading, listening, watching, understanding, and being around and learning from people that are better than you. It's again uncomfortable. The kind of progress you'll make in terms of being a person of influence, unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the speed you gain by doing that is incredible. So it's incredible how much speed you can gain by just immersing yourself in being uncomfortable through that process. The speed that you gain by doing it is a game changer. I promise you, it's a game changer. All right. So that's number one. All right. Give yourself the permission to do it. All right. Number two, pretty easy. Again, simple, but not easy. Let me put it to you that way again. Simple, but not easy. And that is trusting the zig-zag process of becoming a person of influence. What do I mean by zigzag process? Do you think from where you are now to where you realistically think you could and even should be as a person of influence, do you think that's a straight line? Do you think it builds on successful experience after successful experience after successful experience in a straight line until you reach it? Or do you think you have some valleys to go down first? Maybe go up on some peaks and then more valleys to go down. Do you think between here and here, do you think it's a straight line? Or do you think you may be kind of having to, what? Zigzag. You got to trust the zigzag because that's the process it's going to take. Why? Because of what we just talked about. A, you're getting into a level where you're doing things that make you uncomfortable. You're being around people that are going to make you uncomfortable. Do you think that your progress is going to be a straight linear line from A to Z? Hell no. You're going to have disappointments. You're going to have problems. You're going to have, failures. It's not always going to work out. No. And you're going to be like, oh my God. Oh, this is hard. Do I really trust the process that I'm going through here? You're going to have that conversation with yourself many times. And by the way, they happen at like 2:45 to 3:30 a.m. is when you have those conversations. I know. And those people that are and becoming and even growing as influencing kind of people know this too. It's a zigzag. It's a zigzag. So you've got to trust the process. Trust that zigzag process is ultimately taking you to being that person of influence that you can be. Man, from when I started as a prison guard, okay, and the things that the peaks and valleys that I've gone through, I mean, this episode could be 28 hours long and we would only cover half of it. I promise you. I'm not going to put you through it. Okay? I'm not going to do that. But it's the truth. It's the truth. Okay? But what I have been able to learn and who I've been able to come as a person and as someone of influence, and again, I'm just getting started, has been just, again, the speed that happens. Because at the time, the zigzag doesn't seem to really take you there in a speedy fashion. But what you find out later is that's exactly what you needed to gain the speed and to compound the time to get from where you are to where you want to be as an influencer. Okay? All right, so let's kind of backtrack. Let's kind of come full circle here, and let's go over these two main keys again. How do you become from where you are now to where you could be as a person of influence? All right, how do you get there? What do you need to do to be a person known as a person of influence? Number one, you got to give yourself permission. Got to give yourself permission. And remember, I talked about those two kind of sub little categories of that. That's number one, being uncomfortable, right? Being uncomfortable. We talked about that, okay? And man, it's just huge, is knowing that you've got to be uncomfortable and do those things that make you uncomfortable and continue to do that. And then number two is you got to trust the process. You got to trust the process. Okay, be uncomfortable, give yourself permission. Subcategory, being uncomfortable in what you're immersing yourself with and who you're spending time with, because that will create speed for you to be that person of influence. And then number two is trust that zigzag process. Trust that zigzag process. And if you do these two things, you'll find yourself developing into and becoming that person of influence that you knew you could be, and to have that kind of impact on the people that you want to impact, and the feeling that you'll have by doing the work and going through that process. Man, there's hardly any other better feeling in the world. All right. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this episode on becoming the person of influence. Remember, I talked about going from prison guard to, the influencing the number of people that I do, and I'm just getting started. Man, I hope you take some of this information, you use it, you work on it, and you'll find the results to be fantastic. Take care.